The night the sky came apart, I did not save the horse. The horse saved us. I have told this story maybe 4 times in 11 years, and every time I get to the part where the gray came out of the rain, some part of my chest folds up small and I have to stop. People think a wild horse is just weather and muscle, something beautiful that belongs to nobody. That's what I thought too, right up until the moment a Mustang who owed me nothing, who I had chased, cursed, and failed to catch for 6 seasons, turned around inside the worst storm this county ever saw and walked back into it. For a child, he had no reason to know. For an old man, he had every reason to hate. You want to know what a choice looks like? Not the kind we make from a warm kitchen, the other kind. The kind an animal makes when the whole world is screaming at it to run. Stay with me, this one still keeps me up. The first thing I remember is the sound the wind made against the tack shed, not a howl. People always say howl, but it wasn't that. It was a low, throat-deep pressure, like the whole plane had leaned its weight against the boards and meant to push them flat. I stood in the doorway with a coil of rope going useless in my hands, and I thought, plain as anything, this is not a normal storm. I have kept a weather log for 31 years. Little leather book cover gone soft as a glove, a pencil stub jammed in the spine. My wife used to laugh at it, said I loved that book more than I loved conversation, which was probably true and probably why she was right about most things. That evening before the power went, I had written 4 words in it. Green sky, air wrong. I underlined wrong twice. I don't know why. Some animal part of a man knows before the rest of him is ready to. Let me back up, or none of this will land the way it should. My name is Emmett Rourke, and I ran a cattle and horse outfit up on the high flats where the county road quits pretending to be paved. 200 and some acres of grass, sage, and rock that God apparently made left-handed. My people had it before me. I was going to be the last, and I had made my peace with that in the way you make peace with a bad knee. You stop expecting it to be different and you go on walking. I lived alone out there. Had for 6 years by then since Marion. I won't spend your time on that. She's not the story, though she's in every part of it the way the smell of a person stays in a coat. I'll only say the house got very large after and very quiet, and I got into the habit of talking to the dog and the horses and, God help me, the weather book, because a voice needs somewhere to land or it starts to rot in your chest. That summer my granddaughter came to stay. Josie was 9. She was my son Daniel's girl, and the reason she came to me for 6 weeks each year was a whole other sorrow I'll keep short. Daniel and I did not speak. Hadn't, real speaking, since he left at 18 with a slammed screen door and some true things said that could not be walked back. He blamed me for the way the ranch ate his mother's health. Maybe he was right. A man can be right and still be the thing you can't forgive. But somewhere in all that ice, Daniel's wife Renata, a warmer soul than either of us deserved, decided the girl ought to know her grandfather, decided it quietly and firmly, and every June a truck would rattle up my road and Josie would climb out with a backpack and a book, and that flat, watchful expression kids get when they've been told to be polite to someone they've been taught, without anyone saying it out loud, to be careful of. The first year she barely spoke. The second year she found the barn cats. By that summer, the storm summer, Josie and I had worked out a kind of language, not a lot of words in it. She was a serious child, thin-wristed, with Daniel's stubborn jaw and Renata's dark eyes, and she had this habit of narrating small facts to herself under her breath when she was nervous. That's a kestrel. Kestrels hover. The barn is 104 years old. Little anchors she'd throw out to hold herself steady. I recognized it because I did the same thing into a leather book. We were, the two of us, people who talked to keep from drowning. And she loved the gray. I should tell you about the gray. He first showed up on my land the spring after Marion died, part of a small wild band that drifted down out of the Badlands when the water got thin up there. A blue-roan stallion, that steel and smoke color that looks silver in some light and storm cloud in others, with a black mane that never lay flat and a white sock on one hind leg like he'd stepped in paint and never got it off. Big through the chest, careful, smart in a way that made you feel watched. I tried to catch him. I'll be honest about that because it matters later. A wild stallion on your land is trouble. He'll cut your mares out of a fence and take them. He'll fight your geldings. He'll tear up ground and lead a band through your hay. The sensible thing is to run them off or catch them. I tried to catch him. 6 seasons I tried. Traps, water sets, a hired man with a rope and a fast quarter horse. One genuinely stupid attempt on my own that ended with me on the ground and my shoulders singing hymns for a month. He beat me every time. Not with panic. That's the thing I could never explain to anybody. He beat me with patience. He would stand 100 yards off and look at my whole operation like a man reading a contract he had no intention of signing. I hated him. I want that on the record too, because the version where I always secretly loved him is a lie, and you came here for the true thing. For years that horse was, to me, one more thing on this earth I could not hold, could not tame, could not keep from walking away. He got tangled up in my head with Daniel and with Marion, and with the whole long list of leavings that made up my life. And some nights I sat on the porch and watched his band graze silver in the moonlight, and I wished him gone with a bitterness that shames me now. Josie loved him from the first hour she saw him. She named him, not out loud to me at first. I found it in the margin of the bird book she carried in her careful print. Ghost. She'd sit on the top rail of the horse pen in the long evenings and just watch him out on the flat, still as a fence post, and once I came up quiet behind her and heard her doing the thing, the narrating thing, only soft, only to herself. He isn't scared. He's just deciding. There's a difference. Grandpa doesn't know the difference. That last part put a splinter in me I carried a long time, because she was 9 and she was right. Now the storm. It came up the afternoon of the 6th of June from the southwest, and every rancher on the high flats had spent the day feeling it coming in his teeth. The cattle were restless by noon, bunching in the low corner, tails to a wind that wasn't there yet. My old collie, Bess, wouldn't leave the porch. The air had that green weight to it, heavy and metallic, and by 5 the light had gone the color of a bruise going yellow at the edges. I got the horses in. I ran 4 head then. 3 geldings and a sweet old bay mare named Dovey that Josie rode. And I got them into the horse pen with the run-in shed, and I told myself the shed would hold. I was wrong about a great many things that day. Let me start collecting them. The radio said severe. The radio, God love it, is always saying severe, and we out here have a lifetime habit of nodding at the radio and going on. But this one had a name to it later, and a National Weather Service report, and old men in the feed store still measure other storms against it. What came was not one storm, but a train of them, cell after cell, and inside the middle of it, a wind that touched down twice within a mile of my house without ever fully making up its mind to be a tornado, which, if you have never lived through it, is somehow worse than the clean cruelty of a tornado because it just grinds. It leans and grinds and screams and does not pass. It stayed over us better than 2 hours. Josie was in the house. I want you to hold on to that. She was in the house at the kitchen table with a flashlight and her bird book, and the last clear thing I said to her before it all came apart was, "You stay put, you hear me. Whatever you hear, you do not come out that door." And she looked at me with those dark eyes and she said, "Okay, Grandpa," in that flat, polite voice. And I believed her, and I went out to see to the animals, and that was the mistake that has cost me more sleep than all my others put together. The first hour was just work. Brutal, soaking, ordinary work. Rain came sideways and then it came in sheets that had no direction at all, just water everywhere like standing under a river. I checked the cattle. They jammed into the low corner and there was nothing to do but let them. Cattle will drift and huddle and mostly survive if you leave them their instinct. I got to the horse pen and the geldings were wild-eyed and spinning, but the shed was holding and I threw the gate chain and lashed it. Dovey, the old mare, she was the calm one. She always was, and I remember putting my hand flat on her wet neck for just a second, more for me than for her. Then the hail started, and everything got worse fast. Not small hail. the big kind. Golf balls and then bigger, and the sound of it on the shed roof in the truck and the whole world was like being inside a drum somebody was beating with a hammer. I got knocked good on the shoulder and once on the head, saw white, went down on one knee in the mud. And in that ringing half-second, kneeling in the muck with ice coming out of the sky, I looked up out past the pen, out onto the flat, into the gray moving wall of it. And the gray was there. The stallion, Ghost, out on the open flat alone, no band around him, standing broadside to the worst of it with his head low and his rump to the wind. And even then, even down on my knee and half-stunned, I thought, where's his band? Because a wild stallion does not stand alone in the open in a storm. He gathers his mares, he moves them to what shelter the land offers, a cutbank, a draw, the lee of a ridge. He does not just stand. Unless something has already gone wrong. I didn't have time to chew on it. The hail eased for a moment, these storms breathe, they gather and let go, and I used the gap to run, bent double, back toward the house to check on Josie, and that's when I saw the kitchen door. Open. Banging on its hinges in the wind, open. I have tried over 11 years to find words for what that did to me, and I can't quite. It was like the floor of the world dropped out. I ran. I remember the run, and I remember nothing of the ground under it. Into the kitchen, flashlight on the table, still lit, throwing a little useless circle up at the ceiling. Bird book open. Chair pushed back. No child. Josie. The wind took it. My own voice came back to me thin and stupid, torn off my mouth. I went through the house calling her, every room, the closet she liked, under the beds, the bathroom, and she was not there, she was not anywhere, and the whole time some cold clerk in the back of my skull was reading me the facts in a flat voice. The door was open. She's outside. She's outside in this. 9 years old, 60 pounds. Hail that put you on your knee. She's been out there some minutes and you did not know. I went back out into it. And here is the part I have to tell slow, because it is the hinge the whole thing turns on, and if I tell it fast you'll think it was luck or fancy, and it was neither. I stood in my own yard and I screamed her name into a wind that ate it, and I did not know which way to go. That's the terror people don't understand about open country. There is no which way. It is not a hallway. It is 200 acres of rock and grass and draw and dark. And the rain had cut visibility to maybe 40 feet, and the light was almost gone, and every direction was the same roaring gray nothing. And my granddaughter, my son's daughter, the one warm thing left that connected me to the boy I'd lost, was somewhere in it. And I could run the wrong way and never find her and spend the rest of my life knowing I'd run the wrong way. I want to be plain. I was not brave in that moment. I was unmade. I stood there and I think I made a sound that wasn't words. And then, out past the pen, in the last of the light, the gray moved. He'd been standing broadside still that whole time. Now he turned not away from the storm, into it, and he took a few steps out onto the flat toward the far draw, the deep one that runs down the east side of my land toward the creek. And he stopped, and he looked back. At me. You'll do what you'll do with that. I know how it sounds. I have argued myself out of it 100 times, sitting in a dry kitchen with all my sense about me. A horse doesn't reason, a horse doesn't know a child is lost. It was fear, it was coincidence. It was an animal moving the way animals move. I've said all of it to myself. And every time I come back to the same wall, and the wall is this. I have spent my whole life around horses. 60-odd years. I know what a spooked horse looks like. And I know what a horse driving stock looks like, and I know what a horse fleeing looks like, and this was none of those. This was a thing standing at the mouth of a draw in the worst storm of my life, in a place a wild horse had no business being, looking back at a man to see if he would follow. He took another step toward the draw, looked back again. And God forgive me for every rope I ever threw at him, I followed. The wind came up again as I ran, and the hail with it, and I lost him in the gray twice, and each time he was there again when it thinned, always at the edge of my seeing, always drawing east, toward the deep draw, toward the creek that I suddenly understood, with a lurch that nearly dropped me, was going to be running. In a storm like this, that dry draw wouldn't be dry. flash country. That draw could fill bank to bank in minutes with brown water coming down off the whole shoulder of the flats, and a 9-year-old who'd gone out looking for what? For me. For the horses. For the horse. A 9-year-old down in that draw when the water came. I ran until my lungs tore. The gray drew me on. And that is where I have to stop for now, because what I found down in that draw and what the gray did next, the choice, the one this whole story is named for, the thing no one who saw it will ever be able to forget or fully explain, is not something I can tell you in a hurry sandwiched between other words. It deserves its own breath. I'll only leave you with this, so you carry the right weight into what comes. When I finally reached the lip of that draw and looked down, I saw two things at once in the last gray light. I saw my granddaughter, and I saw the water coming. The draw was already talking when I reached its lip. That's the only way I can put it. A dry wash in this country is silent 9 days in 10, just a crack in the land, a scar full of shadow and old cow bones. But when the water starts to come, before you ever see it, you hear it. A low mutter down under the wind, moving stones against each other, a sound like the earth clearing its throat. I had heard it maybe twice in my life, both times from a safe distance, with a fence and good sense between me and it. Now I stood at the edge of it in the dark with the rain coming flat, and I looked down and there was Josie. She was maybe 30 feet below me and 40 feet along, out on a shelf of gravel and clay about a third of the way down the bank, and she was not moving right. She had one leg folded under her wrong, and she had both arms wrapped around a half-buried root wad, an old cottonwood that had washed down in some flood years back and lodged there and grayed out to bone, and she had her face pressed against it, and she was so small. That's the thing that comes back to me. In all that noise and dark and violence she was so small, a smudge of pale rain jacket against the black clay, and if I had not followed the gray to that exact place at that exact minute, I would have run right past her in the roar and never known. Josie. She turned her face up. I'll carry that face till they put me in the ground. White, streaked with mud and something darker at the hairline, her mouth already moving before any sound reached me, and when it did reach me, torn and thin up the bank, it wasn't help and it wasn't Grandpa. It was the narrating, the anchor throwing. I caught the ragged edges of it. The water comes from the top, it fills from the top, I have to get above the... She was doing the thing, reciting facts to hold herself together, and even then, even falling apart myself, I understood she'd worked out exactly what I'd worked out. The water was coming. She was below it, and her leg was wrong. Later, much later, in a hospital hallway that smelled of coffee and disinfectant, I would piece together how she'd gotten there. She had gone out for Dovey. Just that. She'd heard the horses screaming in the pen through the storm, and she was 9 and she loved them, and she could not sit at a table with a flashlight and let them be afraid, and she had gone out to be with them the way she'd have wanted someone to come be with her. And the wind had caught her and turned her around, the way it turns grown men around, and in the gray blindness she'd wandered wrong, away from the pen, out east, and stepped off the lip of the draw in the dark and slid and rolled and stopped here, on this shelf, with her ankle broken and a gash over her ear and the whole shoulder of the flats beginning to pour its water down toward her. I did not know any of that yet. I only knew I had to get down to her. And I had perhaps minutes, and I was 62 years old with a shoulder that had never healed right from the last time I'd been fool enough to go one-on-one with wild country. I went over the edge. It was not climbing. It was controlled falling, is what it was, grabbing sage and rock and root, going down that greasy bank on my heels and my backside, and about halfway I lost it entirely and slid the rest and hit the shelf hard enough to knock the wind clean out of me. I lay there a second sucking at air that wouldn't come, hail bouncing off my back, and Josie's hand found my sleeve. Her fingers dug in. I have never in my life felt anything grip like that. A drowning grip. A grip that was using up everything she had left. Grandpa, just that. The polite flat voice was gone. Under it all along there'd been this, a child, terrified, calling the one word she had for me. I got you, I got a knee under me. I got you, I'm here. And I heard the water. Not the mutter anymore, the real thing up canyon coming. You could hear it building the way you hear a train you can't yet see. A rising, grinding, freight-heavy roar, folding the wind into it. And I looked up draw into the black and I could see it now, or see where it was. A paler churning where the dark should have been solid, brown water pushing a wall of ripped brush and fence posts, and whole small trees ahead of it. And it was coming down that draw at the speed of a running horse. And we were on a gravel shelf a third of the way up a bank we could not climb in time. I did the math a body does without asking your permission. I could not carry her up that bank, not with her leg, not with my shoulder, not in the time we had. I might get myself up if I went right now and clawed like an animal. And I understood, kneeling in the mud with my granddaughter's fingers locked in my sleeve, that I was not going to do that, that I had already decided in some place below deciding that I would go into that water holding her before I would go up that bank without her, and that we were, the two of us, most likely about to die in the bottom of a ditch on land my family had bled into for 100 years. I got her up against me. I got my arms around her and I turned my back to the up canyon dark so the water and the brush would hit me first. She pressed her muddy face into my neck. She'd stopped narrating. That silence was the most frightening sound of the whole night. Close your eyes, I told her. My voice didn't even shake. I've wondered about that. Hold on to me and close your eyes. And that is when he came down the bank. I did not see him at the top. There was no drama to it, no rearing silhouette against lightning, none of the things you'd put in a story if you were making one up. There was just, suddenly, the gray on the shelf with us, having come down that murderous bank the same suicidal way I had, and he was between us and the water. Broadside, the way he'd stood out on the flat. Head low, ears flat, that black mane plastered down. The white sock the only bright thing in the whole black world, and he planted himself up canyon of us, uphill, between the two of us and the thing that was coming, and he braced. I've gone over it and over it. What he understood, what he didn't. Whether an animal can know what a flood is, can know what a child is, can weigh his own life against a stranger's and come down on the wrong side of the weighing on purpose. Every rational bone I own says no. Says he came down out of blind storm panic. Says a horse in terror seeks the company of any living thing. Says I'm an old man laying meaning over an accident because I need the meaning more than I need the truth. But I was there, and I'm telling you he chose. He came down off open ground where he was safe. He put himself uphill of us, in the path, in the one place that would take the first and worst of the water. He did the thing every instinct in a wild horse screams against. He stood still in the open and let it come to him so that it would come to us slower and less. The flood hit him, and I felt the shove of it through his body and through the ground and through us. Brown water and brush exploded around his legs and chest, and the noise was the end of the world. And he staggered, and he did not go down. He would not go down. And the water that reached us past him was waist-deep and hammering instead of the head-high killing wall it would have been. And I got my feet set against the root wad and my back against his shoulder. I could feel him trembling, feel the enormous furnace heat of him even in that cold, feel his heart going like a fist on a door. And the three of us stood in the bottom of that draw while the flash flood came down and did its best to take us and could not, quite, because a wild thing had decided it would not let it. I don't know how long. Time doesn't work in a thing like that. Long enough that my arms gave out and came back and gave out again. Long enough that Josie went limp against me, and I thought I'd lost her and shook her, and she came to with a cry that was the sweetest sound of my life. Long enough that the first surge passed and the water dropped from waist to thigh to knee, still hard, still cold enough to kill slower, but no longer trying to peel us off the earth all at once. And when it had dropped enough, when there was a gap, the storm breathing again the way it had all night, the gray moved. He did not bolt. That's what I keep telling people who want the tidy version, the version where the noble animal has done its noble thing and gallops off into the lightning. He didn't do that. He was exhausted. I could see it. He turned careful in that churning knee-deep water, and he put his big head down low toward us, toward Josie, and I swear this on my wife's grave, and I don't swear on it lightly. He pressed his muzzle for 1 second against the side of the child's head. The bleeding side. Just rested it there. A breath. Then he pushed his weight into the down canyon bank where it had washed to a slope, and he lunged and scrambled and clawed his way up out of that draw the way he'd come, and at the top he stood one moment against the last gray light. And then he was gone, out onto the flat, into the storm, and I never in my life saw him whole and near again. I got Josie up the down canyon slope where he'd broken it down. It took me the better part of an hour, in stages, hauling and resting, her arms around my neck and her broken ankle bumping, and her not making a sound because she'd gone somewhere past sound. And I talked to her the whole way, told her about her grandmother, told her about her father when he was small and rode on my shoulders through this same grass. Told her every warm thing I'd been too proud or too broken to say out loud in 6 years of quiet, because I did not know if she'd live to hear it any other night, and I was not going to let her go into the dark thinking she was a child anyone had been careful of. We reached the house near midnight. The storm broke apart an hour after. I got a fire going and dry blankets on her, and I could not get the truck out. The road was a river. So I did what my grandfather would have done. I kept her warm and watched her breathing and prayed to a God I'd mostly quit speaking to. And at first light the county's boys came up the flooded road in a high-clearance rig, because a neighbor had radioed that Rourke's land got hit hard. And they took my granddaughter to the hospital in town with a broken ankle and 11 stitches and hypothermia, and a concussion and a heart, the doctors said, that was strong as a horse's. She lived. I'll say it plain because part 1 left you in the water and you've earned it. She lived. She's 20 now. She's studying to be a large animal vet, which will surprise none of you, and she has a small blue tattoo on the inside of her left wrist that is just a horse's hind leg with 1 white sock, and she will not explain it to people she doesn't trust, and I love her past the end of language. Her father came to the hospital. Daniel drove 11 hours through the tail of the same storm system, walked into that hallway gray-faced and wrecked, and found me sitting outside his daughter's room with mud still in the creases of my hands. And we did not fall into each other's arms. I want to be honest to the end. Real people don't, mostly. He stood in front of me and I stood up, and there was a terrible long moment where 30 years of ice sat between us in that fluorescent hallway. And then his face came apart and he said, "They told me you went into the water after her." And I said, "The horse went in after her. I just held on." And he looked at me like he didn't understand, and I found I couldn't explain it standing up, so I sat back down, and he sat down next to me close, the way he used to sit next to me on the truck bench when he was a boy. And neither of us said another word for a long time, and it was the most we'd said to each other in 3 decades. We're not fixed, Daniel and I won't sell you that. But we speak now. He calls on Sundays. It's a bridge with some boards still out of it, but you can cross a bridge like that if you go careful and we go careful, and that is more than I ever thought I'd have. I looked for the gray after. Of course I did. I rode the flats every day I could for a month. I found the reason he'd been alone that night. His band, 3 mares and 2 foals, had sheltered in a cutbank a mile up that same draw, and the flood had taken part of the bank down on them. I found sign of it. I won't put the rest here. I'll only say that when I understood what he'd already lost that night, up canyon, before he ever came down the bank to us, when I understood that he came to a strange man and a strange child in the dark, and put his body in the water having already lost his own to that same water an hour before, I got off my horse, and I sat down in the grass, and I cried like I have cried maybe 3 times in my life, and one of the other times was Marion. I never found him. Some winters I'd see a band far off with a gray in it and my heart would do a foolish thing, and I'd ride out, and it would be some other horse, some ordinary beautiful animal, and I'd tip my hat to it anyway and ride home. I don't know that he lived. That's the truth I have to leave you with because the tidy ending isn't mine to give. A wild horse that goes down into a flash flood and holds against it and loses his family in the same night. The odds don't favor a long life after. He may have gone down that same summer. He may have grown old and gray-white and died fat in the Badlands with a new band around him, an old king with a story no other horse could know. I'll never know which. Josie and I have talked about it, the two of us, out on the porch on summer nights, and we've decided, the way you decide a thing you can't prove because the deciding keeps you whole, that he's out there still. Or was, for a good long while, deciding things, 100 yards off, watching a life go by that he had, for one night, reached into and refused to let end. People ask me why he did it. Every time I tell this, somebody asks and they want me to say some clean thing about the nobility of animals or the bond between man and horse or God's hand in the storm, and I've got nothing clean for them. I chased that horse for 6 years with ropes and traps and spite. I wished him gone off my land with real venom in my heart. I was, to him, nothing but the thing that hunted him across the grass. He owed me less than nothing. And when the dark came all the way down and there was a child in the water, he was the one who chose to come. I've stopped trying to understand it. Some nights, though, I take out the old weather book. The cover's gone all the way to rag now, and I turn to the 6th of June, and under green sky, air wrong in a hand that's gotten shakier than it was, I've written the only true thing I know about that night. Just 3 words. I've never underlined them because some things you don't have to. He came back.